Alrighty, so I'm Tyler Woodward, and we're here today with my father and the author of Uncommon Valor, a collection of poems for the Patriot, Brian W. Woodward. So today we're going to talk a little bit about your new book that's coming out, Uncommon Valor, a collection of poems for the Patriot, which is being released on Amazon on July 4th. Be sure to also visit his social medias on Facebook and Instagram and even TikTok at Brian W. Woodward _author on all social medias. So today, let's start with a little bit about what inspired you to write this book of poetry, Uncommon Valor.
Well, back in December of last year, I was bouncing around from one restaurant to the next, and I ran into some friends from a previous restaurant that had closed down, and I was looking for a place to eat breakfast. And these folks told me that this diner had reopened in a new location, and it was called Doc's Family Cafe over off of Deltona here in Spring Hill. And so I think it was a Tuesday, happened to be the 12th of December. I stumbled in there thinking that I was just going to.
That's my anniversary.
It's your anniversary?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was in there.
12/12.
Yeah. So I stumbled in there and thinking that I was just going to grab a quick bite to eat and be out of there. But I don't travel anywhere without my notebook. And because I'm always getting inspiration to write something from everybody, everything. I walked in and I was greeted, "Hey, how you doing?" And so they told me to sit anywhere I'd like. And so I sat at this particular table, and I noticed that the tablecloth is covered in stars and stripes. And the theme of the restaurant was generally a veteran catered atmosphere. And it was very inviting. And I thought, this is kind of cool. As a veteran, I thought, well, this is awesome. Mm-hmm. I could really learn to appreciate this. And so I sat down at this booth, and it was mid-morning between lunch and breakfast. And the waitress came over, and her name was Beth, and she said, "What would you like to drink?" And I said, "Well, I'd like a cup of coffee." As I was waiting for her to bring my cup of coffee, I turned and looked at the picture that was on the wall over the booth, and it was entitled "The Wall," and it was a picture of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And I thought and I looked around. This is pretty cool. And I noticed that every booth and every wall was specific of a branch of the service or a dedication to a particular idea or ideology having to do with the military and veterans and fallen soldiers and this and that. So I started writing my very first poem that inspired this whole book, was called "The Wall." I wrote the poem in probably not even 10 minutes. And as I was finishing writing the poem, I sat back and was drinking my cup of coffee, waiting on my food, because if you're in a hurry, you don't go to Doc's, because the food is hot and fresh, and it's very much worth the wait. So as I was waiting on my breakfast, brunch mid-morning, the waitress, Beth, came back over to my table. She said, "Did you just write that?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Can I read it?" I said, "Sure, you can read it." And she said, "This is pretty cool." She said, "Can I show it to the owner?" Why not? So while she had it back, showed it to the owner, I was reading the menu, just perusing the menu.
Right.
Because she brought the menu and had left it on the table from another table that she had just got finished bussing. And the backstory behind Doc's Diner was in there, and how the owner's son, the owner happens to be Lynn Anderson and Kevin Anderson, their youngest son had been killed in Iraq, in Operation Iraqi Freedom, by an IAD, an explosive that exploded under his side of the Humvee where they were traveling in. On their way for him, he was a medic, thus the name Doc. If you're a medic in the military, everybody just calls you Doc.
Right.
You have no name other than Doc. The gist of this whole thing is that I read that particular backstory and how Josh, the soldier who was killed, their son, and it inspired me. I didn't know his name at the time. It inspired me to write the poem Doc. So while I was still waiting on my breakfast, I penned another poem, and it was called simply Doc.
Right.
Well, I wrote that poem, and Beth came back to the table, and she said, "You wrote another one?" I said, "Yeah, that's what I do. I'm a writer."
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "That is so cool." She said, "I've got to introduce you to the owner." So she brought Lynn out of the kitchen when she had a few minutes. Lynn came out of the kitchen and she sat down, and like she always does with every new customer, she sits down and introduces herself. And Beth said, and then they call Lynn Mom and they call Kevin Pop. She said, "Mom, you got to read this." So Lynn sat there and read it in tears.
Yeah.
That's how this got started.
Yeah, and the rest is history. I mean, it's we've got a proof of the book right here.
It is the proof. It is,
and we've got the hardcover that's coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
So all of them will be available for sale on Amazon July 4th,
which is a pretty cool date for my patriotic book,
right,
to come out on. So it could be, the timing couldn't be more perfect for this whole thing, and
right,
it's all just working out so smooth, thanks to you and a lot of other cool folks.
And the Kindle version is actually available for pre-sale on Amazon. And if you wanted to check out brianwwoodward.com, that is the website, his author website, where you'll be able to find all the links to all of that stuff. And of course, this is your second book of poetry that you've written.
Yes.
How is this different from your first book of poetry?
Well, this particular book is specifically poems for the Patriot. It is a patriotic themed book inspired by the patriotic theme of the diner, the cafe. And all the patrons that come in there have a different, unique story. And so some of their stories are in here. But it differs primarily because my first book, For Rhyme and Reason, deals primarily with everyday life things, life, love, and the loss of life, and dealing with death. A lot of dark stuff with a few fringes of light around the corners, just so that it's not so morbid. It deals a lot, my first book deals a lot with death and how to deal with the passing of a loved one or a friend or yourself.
Right.
If you feel like if you're on the downhill side of life and things aren't going your way, you might be dying. I was able to address a lot of life and death situations in my first book that come to fruition in this particular book, Uncommon Valor, because it deals with fallen soldiers as well as living soldiers and what we're dealing with, veterans deal with on a daily basis. So
it's similar. It's similar in a way, but this is more tailored to life, love, and loss from the lens of somebody who served and or somebody who is living life as a military spouse or loves or knows somebody in the military.
Absolutely.
It sort of embodies that.
That's correct.
Instead of the broader scope of just life in general.
Right. Which my first book was very broad scope of spectrum of life situations. It was a very heartfelt tribute to all of those things. But when I stumbled into the diner, this book was born.
Right.
And so I'm very happy with the results of this. And folks, the cover of this book speaks volumes for the content. Tyler, my son, my oldest son, is the artist for this particular cover as well. And he just went above and beyond the call of duty and made it explode on the scene. And so I couldn't be more proud of the cover, the book, and of course my son.
What so when you were coming up with a title for these collections, for this collection of poems that you were working on, how did you settle on Uncommon Valor, and what exactly does that mean?
Well, the book has 56, 57 poems, and it was a struggle. I struggled with the title for a day or two, because there is a poem entitled Uncommon Valor in the book. But the flagship poem that's also in this particular book was written before I ever stumbled into docs. And it's called Fallen But Not Forgotten. And it deals with a graveyard scenario of veterans lined up in perfect uniformity in the cemetery up in Bushnell, Florida. So that was my first heartfelt tribute to our fallen from the birth of this country to today.
Right.
Fallen veterans, soldiers, past, present, and future. And it happens to be the flagship poem for this. Uncommon Valor, the poem, addresses something a little off the wall about a veteran who would not ordinarily get any recognition for their time in service.
Right.
Only because of their social situation today. You have to read the book, read the poem to understand what that's about. We may talk about that a little while later. But that's where the concept came from. Uncommon Valor was just after reading all my poems in sequence again and the order that they came about, and the cover and the title meshed so well that it was just a no-brainer. It was, and a collection of poems for the Patriot is a subtitle, and it is all that.
Right.
Says it all.
Gotcha. What was probably the hardest part about writing this book, or kind of deciding what poems you were going to put in this collection? What kind of obstacles did you run into while you were writing the book?
Well, over the course of the past 15 or 20 years, I've written probably 600 poems. 120 of which ended up in my first book after much deliberation. Yeah, thank you. And consideration. So, but Uncommon Valor, the content of this particular book is solely on the principle of patriotism.
Right.
What this country means to me as a veteran.
Right.
As a veteran who's dealt with a lot of social and medical and even to some degree mental issues.
Right.
That most all veterans, past, present, and future, have dealt with. This is a heartfelt, cheerful, soul-searching project that has come about in such a fluent and profound way.
So it's really probably one of the hardest parts is just probably just the self-reflection, you know.
Yes.
You sat with all these poems, you know, for a while. And
yeah. Even though didn't take me long to write each poem, there was a lot of tears went into some of these poems. As I wrote them, I couldn't help, as I was writing my notes in the diner, I start off every morning, and I pick a theme in the diner, and I write about, and I would consider the implications of just little things, the insignia of the soldier sitting next to me, or the dog tags that they would wear, the uniform that they would have worn. Each branch is represented in this book. Each branch of the military is represented in this book, specifically targeted poems that deal with every branch of the military and the dilemmas every day in, day out, things that they deal with that I recognize as a veteran of the Air Force.
Right.
So the poems weren't hard to decide what goes into the book because every poem was written for the book.
Right.
With the book in mind before it even had a title. I knew I was going to put a collaboration of poems together, and it was going to be specifically a patriotic endeavor.
Right.
So, the poems were written for the book. They weren't just written willy-nilly and had to sort through and pick the best ones for the book.
Yeah.
Every poem is the best poem for this book.
Right.
So,
and you know, like you said, every branch of the military is included, you know, which is very familiar just in terms of just, you know, our family. And you served in the Air Force. Your father was in the Coast Guard.
right.
Your brother in the Marines.
Corps.
Yep.
Uncles and aunts in the Marine Corps, Army, Navy, and even up until we have nephews and nieces that are military oriented, either spouses or in the military directly.
Right.
And with the new branch out now, the Space Force, I have a nephew who is leaning in that direction in his Air Force career.
Right.
It's pointing him down that avenue. So eventually there will be poems, sequels to this book that include the Space Force, because it is the future, ultimately the final frontier.
Right.
So, and it will be included at some point in the future.
Right.
Stay tuned.
So how do you hope, with that being said, you know, how do you hope readers will connect with your poetry and kind of the poems in the book?
Well, I have this unique gift / curse that allows me to put myself in your shoes and write about things that you're dealing with that I may not have dealt with personally, but know enough about how I dealt with my situation to be able to adapt those same situations to what you as a military person or a veteran or a spouse of a veteran of a fallen soldier or current active or enlisted or officer in the military would be going through. Or I've been able to put myself in their shoes and think, okay, on a day-to-day basis, this is day in, day out things that a soldier deals with, or a soldier's children deal with, or a soldier's spouse would deal with. And then a soldier's mother or father deals with a fallen soldier.
Right.
I was able to put myself in their shoes and reflect those feelings and those emotions into every single poem. And it's been a very unique journey with this particular book.
Right.
That I'm very happy with the results.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's something in it for everybody, something that everybody will be able to
Yes.
to resonate with, who has been touched in some way by the military.
Well, even for those folks that aren't directly associated with a spouse or a military member, if you have friends or acquaintances that were in the military,
well, I think that's probably what makes it, you know, very unique, is that even people who don't necessarily have a direct connection can read it and realize that in some way they do have those connections. And
as an American in this country, and especially in today's society, it's very important for us to maintain a footing in our patriotic roots. We have a great country. And I feel like the poems help people, even those folks who are average, everyday Americans who consider themselves loyal to the flag of this country, loyal to the concepts of this country, even though we have our faults. And this book addresses some of those issues. It's not a political book. It's not a book of politics. It's not a book of policies. It's a book of understanding.
Right. Right.
Plain and simple. Help you understand where the average everyday GI is coming from, what they deal with on a daily basis. And if you consider yourself a patriot at all, this book is for you. If you don't, read something else, because you're going to become a patriot if you weren't one before. If you read this book, it's going to help you understand a little better about what I went through, what the average everyday soldier or spouse, mother, father, sister, brother, aunt, uncle has gone through, that's been in the military, or that has ever buried a loved one who's died in active service. This book deals with all of those issues and the emotions that go with them.
Right. So I think that pretty much covers everything. Like we said, the book comes out July 4th on Amazon in paperback, hardback, and the Kindle edition. The Kindle edition is available for pre-order right now. And you can visit brianwwoodward.com or brianwwoodward_author on all social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And before we go today, I wanted to see which, I know you have a pretty deep connection to all of the poems. Is there one in particular that you would like to share today that you think is
well, like I said, I mentioned it earlier in the book. There's a poem entitled Uncommon Valor that gets off the beaten path of the average everyday soldier in his after military life, who has experienced difficulty and a disconnect with society, if you will.
Right.
It addresses that. That particular poem, Uncommon Valor, addresses the issues of a homeless veteran. It means a lot to me, even though it's not necessarily it's a story. it's a narrative. It's not necessarily a true story, but it's based on the truth in today's society. It didn't actually happen to me, even though I put myself in the position of it having happened to me. But my flagship poem that I'm most proud of, that started this whole thing even before Uncommon Valor, the concept of the book came out. It was a poem that's also included in my first book, but it was such a good poem. I could not leave it out of its home spot in alphabetical order, mind you, in this particular book of Uncommon, a collection of poems for the Patriot. And it is Fallen But Not Forgotten. I mentioned it before, but it says it all. And if I had to rank them as 1, 2, 3, my 3 best, and we won't go that far, but I think the Before He Was a Soldier is the follow-up to Fallen But Not Forgotten. It would be, if I had to say that my 2 favorite are those 2. The first one is that I wrote over a year ago,
Right.
Fallen But Not Forgotten. And then Before He Was a Soldier, which I just wrote this past Memorial Day, that I was able to read both of those poems at tribute to the troops that I was invited to as a guest speaker, as a guest of the family of Lynn and Kevin Anderson, and tribute to their fallen son and many other fallen soldiers who are honored through that particular tribute to the troops organization, founded by Rocky Lynn, who is a country music singer, and he dedicates, just like I do, this particular book. His whole life is tribute to the fallen soldiers and the wounded warriors of America's armed forces.
Right. Right.
So if I had a poem to read, it would be a battle between those 2.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha. Which we will have. I'm going to be posting some clips of that to social media. So if you haven't, and if you are interested in following and learning more and being informed about when there's new stuff on the horizon,
and there is,
and even
as we speak, there's more books being formatted.
Right.
In the next room. And there's more patriotism to be explored in a sequel to this particular book already. I couldn't include, I write stuff, I'm at the diner every day.
Right.
I'm inspired more every day, but I had to draw a line in the sand. And I had to get something in print for my viewing public and my followers.
Right.
To sink their teeth into, because this is a full course meal. It is a 4-course meal, and it is full of MRIs. Military rations. MRIs, not MRIs, but military rations and SOS and all of the good stuff that goes along with breakfast in the morning. And all of the guys and gals that come into the diner or into the cafe in the mornings, I'm there for breakfast. That's my time of morning. I'm up early. I do my devotionals, my meditation. I go to the diner, and I'm inspired. Every man and woman that comes in there has a story. And I have either overheard their stories and them talking their banter back and forth from the table across from me or behind me or in front of me. And I've been quietly taking notes.
Right.
And their stories have inspired these narratives and these poems to the point of print. And now we have something that we can actually put out there for you guys to and gals to enjoy, to appreciate, and to reflect on.
Right. And so with that being said, I know it's some of the stuff can be a little bit heavy, but to end on a more lighthearted note, what would you say is your fondest, most fun memory of your time in the Air Force?
Well, course, basic training is always a memorable experience because that's something that you never forget. You might forget the details of the everyday, run-of-the-mill job-related issues, but basic training is mentioned in this particular book in the Shadow of the Flag, which is my personal reflection on basic training and how I was introduced to the military, specifically into the Air Force. I'm fond of that poem because it's about me.
Right.
It is a true story. It is based on facts, no fiction, and it's a fun little ditty about how I got introduced to manhood.
Right.
By joining the military, and there's other folks that can probably reflect on that same poem and add their branch of the military to that and incorporate it in that and change the Air Force to Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard.
Right.
And it would be a very similar story.
Right.
Because that's the whole idea about being in the military is the uniformity of it all.
Right.
How you fit into this little niche and how there's different aspects of that uniformity that bring us all together in our armed forces. And the recognition that this book brings to our armed forces, past, present, and future, and to the fallen of our armed forces, both past, present, and the future, that those folks that are going to sacrifice their lives, they're also included in this book.
Right.
But the most fun poem that I wrote in there is probably just something as simple as a cup of coffee, and it's called Joe. And it talks about how the military runs on the strength of its coffee.
Right.
And so it's a fun little poem. It kind of caps everything off. No matter what you deal with in the military, your life, the problems that the military goes through on a day-to-day basis, it all starts and ends with a cup of coffee, and Joe is that cup of coffee. So I invite you to have a cup of coffee and read your copy.
Yep.
Because you'll come to a better realization of what where you were at if you were in the military, where you're going to go if you join the military, and where you've been as a family or a family member of a military person.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. So thank you so much for
thank you for
sitting
putting
down
this whole thing together, and thank you for the awesome cover, and thank you to all those folks who support what I do and who have inspired me to do what I do and have allowed me to be a voice.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So once again, I'm going to put the information, all the links to social media, all the links to the book, the website, brianwwoodward.com. All that's going to be in the description of the video. And so feel free to follow along on social media, and reach out and, let us know kind of your story. If there's something that you'd like to share, and if you get the book and read it and, are impacted by it, let us know.
Because you never know.
Right.
There could be a poem in it. There's a poem in everything. The life is so poetic that it's a matter of finding the beauty in everything and try to make something negative into something positive and beautiful. And that's where this book goes.
Absolutely.
All about that, positivity.
So yeah, everything will be in the description. And thank you guys so much for watching, and be on the lookout for Uncommon Valor, a collection of poems for the Patriot, being released on July 4th, 2024. And then
in a few
days. So thank you so much, and see you next time.